Voting isn't going to the polls on election day anymore. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote, a tool created by Democracy Works, breaks down the options your state offers for casting a ballot, empowering you to decide when and where to vote. Democracy Works is committed to helping you vote no matter what. Their tool, How to Vote, does just that. Sign up for election reminders. See what's on your ballot. Get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot. Explore your options for returning your voted mail ballot. Check your voter registration status. Find your polling site. Make sure you have the appropriate ID. Now, decide when and where you'll vote. This is how you do it. howto.vote.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to bring to you
Supreme.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast. And yes, I'm your host, Supreme Decisions. And today I'm actually going to talk about a myriad of things, but mostly I'm going to deal with something that was brought to my attention. And I haven't decided as of yet if I'm just going to do a double episode, or if I'm just going to do one episode and then come back and give you a second one, which you'll end up getting two this week. Because one of the things that I actually ran across that was interesting to me was things that was in the news pretty much this week, which was the Breonna Taylor grand jury. And the thing that I thought was the most interesting was the simple fact that most people that was having an argument about the entire situation was talking about the recorded conversations that was heard by Breonna Taylor and the supposed suspect that they were actually looking for. And then it talked about her improprieties pretty much as a woman and girlfriend. And then they talked about how she wasn't as innocent as, she possibly was because of the things that was said in the grand jury. And I thought about something. I thought about how words have power. I thought about how I constantly tell you guys, you're painting a picture. And what was clear to me was the fact that whoever was setting this up had painted such a clear picture to the uninformed that most people had forgot about why they were there. The reason for the convening of the grand jury had nothing to do with Breonna Taylor. Yet, that was the only thing they focused on. The convening of the grand jury had very little to do with Breonna Taylor's personal life. Yet, that's all they focused on. That's all evidence, quote unquote, was presented on. And that is what left everybody speechless. Because the reason they were there was because you had 3 police officers that had they actually just told the truth. Literally. That was the only thing that screwed them up. They refused to tell the truth. Had they told the truth, we wouldn't even be having a conversation about Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor's family would not have gotten $12 million. Kenneth Walker, the boyfriend that was in the house with her at the time, would not have gotten $2 million. And just keep in mind, this happened in March. So let's not get it twisted. We're talking about a settlement of more than $14 million for someone in less than 6 months. And this is the thing that most people miss, because you get caught up on grand jury testimony and you forget while you're there. One of the things that people often hear me say that I work with is I constantly tell them, you need to stay focused. You need to stay focused, because they'll get on to the facts of, oh, I want to tell my side. I want to tell my story. Nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares about your side. Because the second you involve you, that's more interesting than something that involves a book. I just want you to understand that. If you want to make it about you, you have nothing to do with the law. You have nothing to do with police procedures. However, your personal background, your personal experiences, all those things, when you make it a part of it, those are the things that people want to talk about. Those are the things people want to see and hear about. They want to become a part of. And that's why I tell you, more often than not, stay focused. Now, I know if you're listening to this, you think, how in the hell can he talk about focus when he rambles 90% of the time? But then if you go back and listen, all my rambling has one focal point. And it's staying focused on the evidence. Or, in many cases, because I also tell you to look for what's not there. The lack thereof. I literally just did a video where I spoke about why I constantly talk about challenging every aspect of even a traffic stop. I've gone over several means of what a speeding ticket would consist of. I even talked about how speeding tickets themselves are pretty much taken. I'm going to go into masterclass and I'm going to show you specifically how to challenge speeding tickets. But the whole thing is staying focused, because no one cares why you are speeding. But there's a procedure for the speeding, but there's also a reason why you shouldn't be speeding. All of those things will be covered. I talk about part of them most of the time. But what everybody tends to lose focus on is the star of the show. And that's evidence. Because remember, even if somebody says something, unless there's evidence to support what they're saying, it's hearsay. So evidence is the star of the show, not the voice that's talking about it, not the person telling their side. Because if it doesn't have anything to do with the book, which is criminal procedures or police procedures, it doesn't matter. These are the things that are brought up in a grand jury case. Because a grand jury, just keep in mind, has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It's just to offer an opportunity to present an indictment. The reason being, an indictment is supposed to show that they have some sort of probable cause to bring forth some charges. Now, the flip side of that is that indictment is only evidence of something that can be rebutted. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Because again, you still have to prove it. You still have to be able to paint the picture. And if you're defending against it, you still have to remain focused on not you, but the evidence. And one of the things that a lot of times happen is called circumstantial evidence or presumptive evidence. And a lot of times we get caught up in words. More people get caught up in words than not. Because I had someone that I was talking to a couple days ago, and I was listening to some of the things they were saying. And I had set up a defense. But in the meantime, again, I tell you guys, I approach your case as if it's mine. I look at your evidence that's against you as if it's against me. Because I want to make sure you're not going out there, or I'm not just giving you some template and saying, go about your business, bro. Just go handle your business. Go on and get it, sis. I'm not doing that. Because I'm actually going through your evidence. Because many times you look at most of the discoveries that I help people with, no two are the same. Why? Because they may be similar things that go along with it, but no two sets of discovery is the same. Why? You want a thorough discovery. Sometimes people have certain aspects of discovery that I'm looking for. Most people don't. There are generally 13 to 14 things I'm looking for. Sometimes that list has been checked off because I don't need 13 or 14 things from a traffic citation. I might need 7. I don't need 13 or 14 things from a shoplifting case. I will need 13 or 14 things if it involves a homicide. Because again, the more information allows me to use a wider brush to paint with. But That goes exactly for you when you're defending yourself, when you're standing up on your own square, when you're standing up on your own two, when you're standing there looking the devil in the eye for yourself. These are the things that you have to know. And the thing I'm talking about is not circumstantial, but it's creating that circumstantial evidence and making it case-specific evidence. Because, again, the evidence itself is the thing that should be front and center, not your story. What needs to be put on blast is every statement, if it is not supported by evidence, is hearsay and should be stricken from the record. But here's the great part about it. There was a point in my trial, just to give you an example, where a police officer went to talking. And my brother's attorney looks over at me because, again, I was first chair as a pro se litigant. And she goes, "You need to object." I looked over at her and I said, "No, let him talk." Because, again, if I cut him off and he says something else that actually has evidence behind it, I can't strike it. But if I let him just get diarrhea of the mouth and be very loquacious, everything he says now gets stricken from the record. And that's what actually happened. Because if you're a liar on one, you're a liar on all in everybody's eyes. Now, is that a gamble? Absolutely, because he said something I wasn't expecting him to say. However, it went along the guidelines of what I was expecting from the prosecution. So I was seeing how deep the rabbit hole went. So whenever I cross-examined him, I got his testimony stricken from the record, and this officer looked like a liar on the stand. Does that mean he was lying? No. It just means that he didn't have any evidence to support the things that he had said on the stand. So therefore, what he said on the stand appeared to the jurors as a lie. He did not look like an honest person. This is why a lot of times you'll have a defense attorney tell you, "No, you don't need to get on the stand." Why? Because one, what are you talking about? Nothing. Unless there's an emotional angle that is needed, and notice I use the word need, not wanted, needed. What is best is generally you shutting up. Because you have a greater chance of going home and not being convicted or found guilty of anything that you're charged with if you just do the one thing that most people don't seem to have the ability to do. And that is keep your mouth shut. That's it. All you have to do is shut up. Because you will not be, you know what, actually you might be amazed the amount of people that say, "Oh, I didn't say nothing to the police. I didn't say nothing." And then the cocky ass cops turn over the body cam and audio. Because you remember I told you they'll turn it over when they think they're right. So when you get video and audio, it's very rarely a great sign unless it's coming from someone outside the police station. Because if it comes from the police, it generally means you're going to have to look for a different angle. And I've had that hit me more than once. Where someone says, "Oh, I didn't say anything to the police," and then you get the video and audio, and it says they're saying everything to the police and convicting themselves. And it's like, are you kidding me? Because now the only thing you can do is work towards a plea agreement because you're guilty. You've convicted yourself because you have to tell your side. You have to give them a reason to do so. And what happens is most people, more often than not, offer consent. Because you have this thing called shutting up. Or even simple. The one thing that I actually told an officer was, we spoke about habit evidence. And the one thing I said to him is, my habit evidence is easy. I've never consented. I actually had my youngest son walking around the house in diapers yelling, "I do not consent. I do not consent. I do not consent." You know why? Because consenting is dangerous. And since I am a master of me, I am the grown person that controls me. I don't offer authority on anybody to be over me. But I also have control and self-control when it comes to actions of those that are serving me. Understand that. Most of us don't understand, one, how that statement is just relevant, nor do they understand how to place themselves in a higher plane where you can actually conduct yourself in a manner to which when a police officer or you're interacting with a police officer, the police officer that is a public servant, so you can hold them accountable for not doing their job properly. Because I don't need to fight you. Not in the street, no. I get to tap them pockets in the courtroom. I get to tap them pockets in federal court. Why? Because you are violating my civil liberties. You are going against your oath of office. You are going against your department policies, not mine. You took the oath. That's your job. Because if I hold Johnny at McDonald's to the standard of if you mess up twice, you're getting fired. Guess what I'm going to hold the guy that, as Chris Rock says, that can't be a bad apple. Because that's our problem. We're allowing bad apples to continue to be bad apples and infect the bunch. And then we're getting upset because we are not doing what we are supposed to do to hold them accountable, to make them better, for lack of a better term. And it's going into these things and being okay with not being treated the way we're supposed to be treated. Being okay with them doing things we know they're not supposed to be lawfully doing. We're being okay with those things where if they don't follow law 100%, well, maybe we need to pay them more money. But then you find out that the ones that are acting up are making six figures. They're making six figures. And you're saying they need to be paid more and trained less. Now, what I've learned, it should not take longer to be a hairstylist than it takes to become a police officer. I think something's wrong with that. I shouldn't have to be a franchise owner and spend more time in training to run a Burger King than it is to carry a gun and protect the public. I shouldn't have longer training doing that. And then you look at the places where the training is significantly longer. They don't have the issues we have. When we look at the places where they are hiring people with high IQs, they don't have the issues we're having. So, when we're looking at certain aspects of these things, and we're understanding it's evidence that rules the world, especially when it comes to court, and it's placing the focus on the evidence is what we need to do. It is something that is imperative that happens. It's placing the burden of proof in one way or another. Because presumptions are just that. They're guesses. Terryville Ohio said a police officer can't guess. So guess what you can't do in a courtroom? You can't guess. But if you leave it open for suggestion, by not focusing on things that are supposed to be there, that are or are not, because even when you're dealing with evidence, you have to make sure the evidence itself aligns and tells a story that you're looking for it to tell. Because one of the great things about doing a cross-examination, it was actually fun, was never asking a question you already don't know the answer to. And I actually had one where I asked a question I didn't know an answer to, and then I got an answer. The problem was the answer created another question. So when he answered, there was no evidence to support his answer. So me being who I was, I knew that there was no evidence to support his answer. I asked for the evidence. Now the prosecution was forced to turn over that evidence. Because I also said some things that went along which kind of forced the judge's hand to allow the evidence to be presented in the manner in which was best for the defense. That resulted in this young man being exonerated. It also resulted in this man receiving a fair trial. Why? Because I allowed him, or I offered him an opportunity to be represented with a vigorous defense. Now, understand this. The person I'm speaking about is a minor. There are things and steps that you have to go through if you are looking for representation that is not part of their bar club. Now, the American Bar Association, even from their own words, states they don't have jurisdiction over any courtrooms and they don't offer licensing to anyone. So whenever they say you're practicing law without a license, guess what? No one has a license to practice law. They have a bar membership. So these are things that are statements that are being made just to scare you. Why? Because there are false expectations appearing real. It's part of the programming. But what happens when there's a glitch in the matrix? When the programming no longer works? What happens then? When you can actually repeat. Choice of counsel, not quality. Understand that if you're bringing on someone from the outside as your legal counsel, your legal consultant, you then waive your right to ineffectiveness of counsel because you made a conscious choice of your defense. Understand that now. You're relieving the court of their duties to perform because you're trusting in someone else to perform in your behalf. And you're going to accept the consequences for it. Now, here's the great part about that. Most of us don't want to accept consequences. Most of us don't want those realities. Most of us can't deal with responsibility. That's why most of us can't tell the difference between want and need. That's why most of us can't move on beyond this is mine and it could possibly be mine, or I have to go to this store. Instead of, why can't I produce this myself? Why can't I go somewhere that offers me an opportunity to have the things that it is I do want? Because we think convenience is a right. I'm going to say that one more time because most of us think convenience is a right, which is why we want to tell our story, because we're placing ourselves in a higher importance than we really are. We make ourselves more important in somebody else's life than we really are. That is the problem. When you understand where you are is your choice, is your consciousness, and your choice of conscious reality are the things that you not only have to live by, but it affects you and those that are immediately around you. Because that requires responsible thinking. That requires responsible action. Because just to give you a quick layout, because again, this is part of that staying focused. Where I talk to somebody, I was giving them a great example. Because one of the things I hate, I absolutely hate it, is texting and driving. Because I've watched a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people be involved in horrendous accidents. Because you are taking for granted, not that you are doing what you're supposed to do, but your eyes are not on the road, and you're taking for granted that the person beside you, around you, or in front of you is doing what they're supposed to be doing. You're taking for granted that they are out there as a good driver. And what's the one thing most of us complain about? Road rage. We complain about things where, hell, they're mostly out of our control. And then the one thing that you need the most control of, you give it away. You give away the control of you. And then when something happens, you're so sorry. I didn't mean to. my intention, but you weren't doing everything that you could to avoid that. Now what happens? Let's say you kill somebody out here, right? You take somebody else's life. Guess what? Their brother has to suffer. Their sister has to suffer. Their mom and dad have to suffer. What if they're married? Their spouse has to suffer. Their children have to suffer. Their work employees and co-workers have to suffer. Their friends have to suffer. What if it's you? Who all lives do you affect? Because just because you're not there, who all lives changes because you no longer exist? Those are the things that most of us never take into account because we don't look at us as simply as, I'm going to stay focused because I have to live for someone else. I have to live for something that's greater than me. When you understand and you place the evidence in a criminal trial, in a civil trial, at a higher standard than yourself, you're going to be able to fight for that. Because most people will not fight for themselves, but they will fight for something. You heard all these people putting up these Black Lives Matter banners and running out here and fighting and destroying cities. But yeah, they'll fight for something else, but they will not fight for themselves because most of those people, just like I stated before, 95% of those that have been confronted for anything that happened with these riots are taking plea bargains. They're sitting in jail. They're not doing anything they can to protest or even protect themselves. Because it's easy to stand up when there is no opposition. Everybody is strong when there is nothing pushing back. One of my famous movies that I actually just love this movie was Two for the Money. And a lot of us that, you may not have actually watched it or whatever, but it's an Al Pacino movie and it's with Matthew McConaughey. And I actually refer to it as me and a former employer of mine. And I called it, that's our story. And the thing about it was, Al Pacino looks at him, he said, you know what, I don't want to, Matthew McConaughey is having an issue with Al Pacino. He said, you know what, I don't want to push him too far. Al Pacino looks him in the eye, he said, I want you to push and push until it pushes back. He said, and then when it pushes back, I want you to push some more. That's what happens. Most people will push and push until they get resistance. That's why we have so many fat folks, because we don't want to resist. As soon as we get some resistance, I'm good. Yep, I'm good. We have no fight in us. That's what most people live for, the resistance. When you watch the movie, what are they talking about? We're the resistance. And they're talking about governmental agents. Nobody wants resistance. Most people don't even understand that doing something as simple as listening to my podcast is offering the opportunity to build a muscle. Because your mind is a muscle. Your brain is a muscle. You have to build it to create sharpness. You have to build it to create an opportunity for it to function properly. That's why you exercise, because the body gets stronger the more resistance you give to it. That happens in life as well. The more resistance you push through, the stronger your life becomes. The easier it becomes. When you're willing to plant your feet, bite down on your mouthpiece, and just fight. Now, that does not mean you fight every battle, because that will be asinine unless you are just a warrior, and that's what warriors do. You just fight. Hope you're getting paid for it. But if that's not what you do, understand, picking and choosing those battles, but when you go to fight to destroy. You don't go there just to pussyfoot around. You go there to get what you want. That's the whole purpose of the fight. You go and get any and everything that you want. Because my fight wasn't about money. My fight was to be left alone. And anybody that wanted to bite down on their mouthpiece and come after me, my vow to them was I would look them in the eye, and I told each and every one of them, I'm going to take everything you believe you love, because all you got to do is beat me. That's it. You want me? I'm here. You want to be emotional? Let's get it. Because there's nothing more dangerous than a fool with a purpose. Because I've even threatened to move cities to sue police officers. because they were going out of their way to not do their job properly. They were going out of their way to just try to intimidate someone. They were going out of their way just to do things, and their partner was allowing it. And most people didn't even realize that their partners have a duty of care until I said it. When I spoke about the George Floyd 4, and I talked about, well, it was only one guy with his knee on the neck. The other 3 was aiding him. Actors in concert. These are not words I just throw out. These are not situations that I just look at. These are things that are actual police procedures. These are written in department policies. I'm not pulling this out my hat, because the one thing I constantly say is you can't argue against you. It's written. I can show you in their books they're written. And I do show you in their books as written. And it's funny because even when they see it, they're shocked because they're not trained on it. And then when people are upset about how they're behaving, which is outside their training, then we have a problem. Because we're the problem for questioning them not following their training. Or what they should be trained on. Should I say that? I think that would be better, because they're actually not trained on what they're supposed to be trained on, which is the reason why we had a problem. So instead of correcting the issue, they're going to enforce Plan B. I get it. Because even in criminal or civil lawsuits, there is a pleading burden, a production of evidence burden. Because even in civil lawsuits, you have to present evidence. Most of it is going to be how the contract was breached. This is what we pull up in federal court. How did this officer breach your civil liberties? Well, here's his oath of office, My Honor, and this is the breach because he had a choice. He followed through with a willful act. Oh, no, it wasn't willful. I didn't know. Oh, so he was ignorant. So he's admitted he's incapable of fulfilling his duty as law enforcement because he doesn't know what the duties are. Because how do they lose qualified immunity? Willful acts or through ignorance. And most of them have no issue saying that they are ignorant as hell. But we don't understand that we need to present evidence to show their ignorance. And that's the problem. Because even in this, the biggest issue anyone's going to have is the satisfying or preventing the other party from satisfying them are the goals of introducing the evidence. That's why the DA doesn't turn anything over, because you ruin their case and plea bargaining stance if you actually have things that exonerate your client. Or in your case, you. Because one of the biggest issues is production of the evidence. Because remember, the only person that has to prove anything is the accuser. So when you see the state of blah, blah, blah versus you, guess what the state of has to prove? Because we understand standing means they have to have a direct injury that was set forth by your behavior or an agreement that you and the state have made. The problem is that also works into the civil liberties aspect, because all of them have to follow federal law. That's why there's a separation. That's why all states have to coincide with federal law. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to enforce the federal law. It's up to us to enforce accountability. It's up to us to actually make them bring forth the body. Most of us will tell them. Some of us actually write it down, but then we forget that there are procedures to this thing. Because there's a procedure to everything that you do. And in doing so is how you win. Now, I've actually decided I'm not going to do a double episode. I'm actually just going to do this one. I'm going to give you a full episode after this. But I want you to understand something. These aren't just given out just to be spouting, just to kind of ruin time or actually burn up time. It's done with a purpose, because I want you to understand that there is something greater, but it starts with you. You can't leave the burden for somebody else to prove something for you or about you or against you without you. You have to be willing to stand up and fight for it. You have to be the one that's going to go out here and bite down on your mouthpiece, because nobody can fight for you. Everyone can fight with you. Because when the Warriors spoke about strength in numbers, that's what it is. Because as long as there's only 5% of people fighting back, guess what? This problem is only going to get worse. Just understand that. 5% of people are fighting back. It's going to get worse. Because even out of that 5%, a lot of people aren't fighting back the proper way. Because we're looking to enforce something that we're not willing to sit down and actually learn, because we won't get out of our own way. We want to do it our way instead of the right way or a proper way. We don't want to listen to anybody that's been there or done that, or we wanted them to do it for free, because their time isn't valuable, because their knowledge isn't valuable, because what they're doing isn't worth anything. But those are the same people you will trust your freedom with. So what does that say about your worth, your time? That's all I got for right now. Give me a little bit. And I love you guys. Keep supporting the podcast. Keep purchasing your t-shirt. Don't forget, you can also send donations through Apple Pay as simply as sending me, yes, me, on your iPhone, a message in Messenger, hitting pay, and let's keep going. Let's keep growing. Supreme, out.